much more of a sense of quality time. And I think that goes for fathers as well. They don't spend as much time as mothers, but they certainly spend more time with children than their own fathers did in the past.
And is the reason because all the students get the meal in the school, that not all the parents can afford the food to buy to their children?
I think, again, you have a small number of parents who can't afford to buy their children breakfast, and I think that's a real terrible indictment of British society, that we have such levels of poverty, that some parents, some families need free school meals, whether that's free school lunches or free breakfast for their children. I mean, that's always been the case. I mean, even when I was at school, many years ago now, I had a free lunch. When my parents weren't working, sometimes I had free lunches, sometimes I had to bring a packed lunch from home. So I think this has always been the case, that there are a small number of parents who are in a financially difficult position, and I think schools should be able to provide a free lunch for those children who need it. But I think what's different nowadays is that there are calls to make this available for every child, so even children whose parents are able to afford it. And at the end of the day, the real problem here is either that there aren't enough jobs, or that the jobs don't pay enough money. That's the real problem that we need to be solving. Just by giving every child a free lunch or every child a free breakfast, we don't actually solve that problem, and we just take yet another responsibility away from those parents who do have enough money and are able to provide their children with breakfast and lunch.
Well, in the British schools, all the children have to have the same clothes, as I understood. They are also not allowed to have extra jewelry, extra clothes, just to see that everyone is kind of equal. Is that the right word for this?
Yes. So lots of schools do have a school uniform in the UK for the children. They all have to wear the same clothes, and I think there's a number of reasons behind this. I mean, people do say it's a way of making all the children the same, and it just takes an element of competition out of getting dressed in the morning. You don't, if all the children have to wear the same jumper and the same type of shoes, you don't know who has enough money for a fancy pair of trainers or designer clothes. But I think also lots of people make the argument that school uniform is important because it gives a sense of identity to the children. You can easily spot which school a child goes to because each school has quite a distinctive uniform. So it gives a sense of belonging to that school and a sense of discipline. I mean, when you're an adult and you go to work, often there's an expectation that you will dress in a particular way in the workplace. And I think encouraging children to dress smartly for school and have some sense of belonging and identity to their school, I don't think those are bad things at all. I think there's a lot of common sense there.
Yeah, because here in Hungary, after the fall of the communism, this ran out of the fashion, because before that everybody had the same uniform in all over the country. So somehow people just changed their mind about it, and also the education system trying to offering a meal and such good advices like we've been talking about at the beginning. But to have the same clothes, that's far here from the daily practice. And when here the university teaches the new teachers, the first advice is that the problem is not with the child, the problem is with the parent. Do you agree with this?
We maybe don't say things quite so explicitly as that in the UK. We maybe don't say the problem is not with the child, the problem is with the parents on the first day of the teacher training course. But I think that general message is absolutely a message that teachers do get nowadays, and particularly in relation to children who might be labelled as having a mental health problem. It's often seen to be the fault of the home, or even children who are behaving badly, exactly as you say. Maybe they are getting into fights at school, or not doing their homework, or causing problems for the teacher. There often is a sense that there must be something going on in the home environment to make children behave this way. Sometimes that might be true, there might be some truth to that, and teachers can take children to one side and have a word and say, do you think is everything okay at home? Are you having any problems at the moment? But I think sometimes it might not be the case that there are problems at home. Sometimes children are just naughty because children are naughty. And sometimes children are just going to not do their homework because they couldn't be bothered doing their homework. And I think the problem is when we start talking about the home environment, really it's making excuses for why children might behave badly or be lazy. And sometimes I think even if there are difficulties in the home environment, actually it's better for the children to say, that's not important when you come to school. When you come to school, we have the same high expectations of you as we have of all the other children. And even if you do have difficulties at home, we still expect you to come to school on time, to sit still, to be quiet, to work hard, to do your homework. And sometimes I think that's actually much better for the children. I mean, certainly much better for their future, for them to leave school with some qualifications, to get an education, than to just learn that all they have to do is make excuses for not working hard in their lives. And it sounds very tough. It makes me sound very hard to say this, very mean perhaps to say this. But again, I think it's actually kinder in the long run to expect children to rise above their family circumstances and aspire to be better than that, and to know that they are judged on what they do rather than on what their parents might do.
I have read about research in the 80s when they checked how the teachers treat the school children. It was about a mathematics class, so where the working class children were studying, the teacher was showing how to solve the problem, and if one of the children was saying that I have another proposal, he said, no, this is how you have to do it, no other way. And then when it was in the middle class students' school, then they let the students to speak, but they didn't force them to think about different solutions. But where the high class was studying, they didn't say the solution. They were forcing them to find out how to solve that mathematical problem. Do you think that this is still relevant in the British society, in the British schools?
I think in Britain we have lots of different types of schools and different types of teachers, and children might meet lots of different experiences, teaching methods over the course of their time at school. There are class differences still, very pronounced social class differences in the UK, and the type of school that a child goes to might depend upon, in the area I live in the UK, we have grammar schools, so children will do a test when they are 10 or 11 years old, and that might decide which school they go to. But lots of schools, people go to the school that's nearest to their house. So if you live in an area that's got very expensive houses, then you're going to be going to a school in a much more wealthy type of area. If you live in a poor area, then you will be going to a school in a much poorer type of area, perhaps a more working class type of area. And I think there are differences in the schools, differences in the type of education. But I don't think it's as straightforward as to say just that middle class children are treated one way and working class children are treated another way. I think there are all kinds of other things that are going on in schools nowadays. I think the situation you're describing, where teachers treat children very differently, I think perhaps that was something much more in the past. I mean, today, I think there is maybe much more of a sense of, still a sense of perhaps of expectations of teachers having certain expectations of which pupils are clever, which pupils are not so clever. But I think we have such a variety of schools. I wouldn't want to say something quite so general as, you know, all working class children are treated in this way, all middle class children are treated in this way. I think there's quite a lot of variety.
But when we speak about those schools which are founded by the government, do they offer the same level of education, or is it a difference by, let's say, living areas, if it's a poor or a rich one?
Yes, so there are certainly social class inequalities that appear in the British education system. This is absolutely true, and there's a huge variation in standards in the British education system as well. So often it is the case that middle class children are doing better at school, will score higher marks in their exams, get better exam results than children from poorer backgrounds and who are going to schools in more working class areas. So it's absolutely true that those differences exist. I would be reluctant to put those differences down just to teaching methods. I think expectation is a big part of this, and I think in more working class areas, often teachers, for all kinds of kind of nice reasons, kind reasons, have lower expectations of pupils, and this ties in with what we were talking about earlier. They might think that because they come from a bad family, or a family with some problems, or perhaps a single parent family, or a family that's got unemployment and poverty, that you can't really expect much from these children, so they lower their expectations. And to me that's a big problem, because if you have low expectations of children, then children don't try to do better than that. They meet the expectations that people have for them, whereas if you have high expectations of pupils, they work hard and they try to meet those expectations. And I think this is why it's a big problem to always be talking about the family background, and to always be talking about what difficulties the children might have at home, because it makes teachers have lower expectations of what these pupils can do.
And what do you think, which education system in the world is the best?
It's a difficult question. I mean, I don't know is the easy answer to that question. It's not something that I've researched. It's not something that I've looked into. I think there are parts of the British education system which can be very good indeed, particularly in the past. I mean, and there are still some schools today that I think are very good. But I would be reluctant to say that the English system overall, as a whole country, was an example of kind of the best in the world. I think some schools are very good, some schools are actually very poor, and I think, in my experience, that seems to be the same in countries around the world. I know people often point to countries like Finland or Sweden as having a very good education system, but often what people forget when they do that is the kind of cultural context, the nature of the society that you're working in. So schools don't exist separately from society. Schools are a part of society. So when we're judging a school, we have to think about the type of society that it's in. So you might have some schools where actually the education is really very, very good, but it's working in a difficult social context that is not prioritising knowledge or prioritising learning. So the teachers are really having to work hard to challenge that culture. Whereas if you have a society that is much more values knowledge, thinks that learning is a much more valuable and important thing to do, then actually you could have a school which really isn't that good and teachers that are not that good. But because the broader culture is one that is more cohesive and is placing more priority on knowledge, then the children will appear to be doing well, even if the schools themselves are not completely responsible for that. But if I had to pick the features of a good school, I mean, for me, it is a school that prioritises the transmission of knowledge, that where teachers are routinely engaged in a discussion about what is it that we want children to know, that they're thinking very much about their purpose in relation to the children, and particularly in secondary schools, but they recognise that their unique role is not to be parents to the children and not to be therapists or counsellors to the children, but that they are experts in subject knowledge and that they know more about whether it's English or maths or history or geography, but they know more than the children, and their job is to pass that knowledge on to the children in the kind of best and most inspiring way, to make the children love these subjects just as much as the teachers did themselves. And for me, that would be a good school. In terms of my own children, I have 3 children, and when I was thinking about what school they would go to and what type of education I would want for them, I used to say to my husband, you know, I just hope that they have a teacher who's really enthusiastic about something, who's really passionate about something. And I didn't even really mind what that was. You know, it could be about astronomy or geography or maths or anything, but just a teacher who was really passionate about wanting to and wanting to share that passion and that enthusiasm for the subject that they loved with the children. For me, that's the most important thing.
And do you think that these kind of differences which come from the society, and it's really a difficult task for the teachers to deal with, those can be reduced if in the school the children doesn't have those opportunities, and if let's say the government is not offering like extra tutorial classes.
Yeah, I think good teachers really can take children from all different kinds of backgrounds, and some start with a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, maybe know how to read, how to write already when they start school, and other children don't and don't have those advantages. But I think if you are a good teacher, then you can work with all the children in that way, and you've got some differences at the beginning, but you can very quickly bring children up so that they're all the same standard. And for me, I think that's why keeping in mind that the goal of education is the transmission of knowledge is such an important thing to do, because if you start from the perspective that you're going to be child-centred, you're going to focus on what are the children interested in, then you reinforce that social inequality, because you've got children who know a lot already, who are going to want to carry on knowing more, and they know the right questions to ask and the right types of topics that they want to study, whereas children who haven't had those advantages don't even know how to ask the questions to know what it is that they're missing out on. So if we take the beginning point of education being the transmission of knowledge, you can assume children know nothing and you can teach them everything that it is important for them to know about the world. I think that is the best way of reducing social inequality as well.
In these days in Hungary, in the elementary and secondary school, the students have to give their phones to the professors who collect to one place. What do you think, what's the best age, from which age the smartphone can be a good friend of the teacher and the good friend of the child?
Oh, this is a very controversial question. I think in every country around the world now, I personally think I think we blame smartphones for too many things. I think it's easy to turn around and say that everything that's wrong with childhood nowadays is because of smartphones. And I think they are useful. You know, if children are going off on their own into town, you know, and you want to find out where they are, it's useful for parents to call their children and find out where they are. But I think one of the reasons why children spend so much time perhaps on social media or with playing games is because they are not doing fun and interesting things in the outside world. And I think rather than focusing on taking phones off children, we need to, as adults, focus much more on getting children to go out into the world, to meet with friends in real life, to engage in activities in the world, and basically have such an interesting and fun life that the phone seems boring in comparison, and they don't want to spend time on their phone because there are so many more interesting and exciting things to be doing or to be learning about. I think in schools it's a little bit different though. I think teachers and head teachers should just say to children that there is absolutely no place for a phone in the classroom. And I think in schools you really, really do not need to have phones. I think my own experience as a teacher and as a parent is just that they are a complete distraction. And if you're teaching a class and someone's phone starts to ring, or someone decides that they need to text their mum to let them know that they'll be home late for dinner, or a child starts getting messages from a pupil in another classroom, this can just be so disruptive, and it's hard enough to get children to sit down, to be quiet, to listen to you anyway, without having that extra distraction coming from the telephone. I think that's one important reason why children shouldn't have phones in school. But I think the other thing as well is that when it's playtime or break or lunchtime, I think it's really important that children do have this opportunity to talk to each other, to go and play football, to run around, or just to sit and talk to other people their own age, face to face, whilst they're having their lunch. For me, you know, there are a few things more depressing than to see a kind of hall full of children eating their lunch or at break time, and they're all just looking at the phone rather than interacting with each other. So, you know, for childhood in general, I think the thing is, give them more interesting things to do, tell them to go outside and meet up with friends in real life. But in the school, I think there is a very, very good argument just for saying that, you know, you're at school now, if there's any kind of emergency, you know, we can get hold of your parents can get hold of us, you do not need your phone when you're at school.
And what do you think about the artificial intelligence, how this should be treated? Because even 9-year-old children can solve easily problems because they know how to operate the smartphone, how to take a picture and give like orders to the ChatGPT. So, and if they are smart enough, they can give questions or ask questions where they get a good answer, and the teacher won't realize that that answer was made by the artificial intelligence.
Definitely. I mean, that's another very good reason. The rise of artificial intelligence is another very good reason for keeping phones out of the classroom. So children have to, if it's maths, for example, I think children really do need to learn how to do these things for themselves, because it's not the answer that's important, having the right answer, so much as knowing the process, knowing how to work things out. And if if you think of your brain a bit like a muscle, like your arms or your legs, you have to work your brain to make it better. And if all children learn how to do is to find out the right answer from an artificial intelligence platform, then they're not really working their brain in the same way. And I think you can see in the UK, there's lots of arguments as to why teachers should kind of work with artificial intelligence and incorporate this in the classroom. But I actually think it's a good argument for making sure that we have exams, for example, where children are going to sit in a hall, just themselves, at the desk, a piece of paper and a pen, and they have to show what they know, handwriting, write it down and hand it off to an examiner. And then you know that every child, it's the fairest form of assessment, every child is being treated the same, and it's the knowledge that they have themselves. So I don't think we can ignore artificial intelligence. We can't pretend it's not there, it's not happening. We need to be aware of it as teachers and the impact that it might be having on education and on children. But I think it can't become an excuse for not actually teaching children knowledge. If anything, it seems to me it becomes even more important that children are able to know how to do things themselves, so that they, when they grow up, they are able to differentiate between kind of real knowledge, if you like, and artificial intelligence sources of information.
And this is my last question, what was the good and bad result of the coronavirus, like closing everything, on the British education system? How things has been changed? How does it affected the mental health of the children and the teachers?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And coronavirus, the pandemic, well, actually, I think we need to be more precise. I don't think coronavirus or the pandemic had any impact on children's education. What's had a huge impact on children's education was lockdown. It was our response to coronavirus that's had such a damaging impact. It was the fact that we shut schools down, that we told children to stay at home. I think this has been very, very damaging for children's education. I have to be honest and say I don't think there was anything remotely positive that's come out of that at all, and we can still see very harmful consequences to this day, where a lot of children, quite sadly, have not even really returned to school. The habit of going to school was broken, and lots of children haven't got back into that habit even now. Our young children especially, or rather the parents, have got out of the habit of taking their children to school. To my mind, this is not even so much a habit, but it's more a sense of purpose, if you like, a sense of school being important. I think clearly lots of these problems were around before the pandemic, before COVID, but I think COVID made absolutely clear that a number of people don't see school as being important anymore. There used to be a real effort to tell children before COVID that every single day in school mattered, but if you were even 5 minutes late for school each day, that over the course of the year, that would be the equivalent of missing a week, and you would miss out on so much that you could have learned. And all the time children were being told it was really important that they were at school and that they got to school on time. And then lockdown happened, and just overnight children were told school's not important anymore. You don't need to come to school to learn. You can sit at home, you can watch YouTube, you can do some worksheets, you can listen to your teacher on Zoom, and that's all that matters. So I think really what we did was we told children that going to school is not important. We told parents that going to school is not important. And I think this has had a really, really terrible impact on attendance, on learning, on standards in education. And it also gives a reason, if you like, to some of the mental health problems that we're seeing, which I do think there's a tendency to overdiagnose mental health problems, but it's become the reason, if you like, the kind of the excuse as to why children come to see themselves in this way as being depressed, being anxious. And I think there's no doubt some truth to it, that children were told to sit at home on their own, for month after month. And if you did do that, if you were sent to your bedroom in isolation, I think that could have been very damaging for children's mental health. And I think the problem is that when lockdown ended, rather than saying to children, right now we have to get back to normal, we have to have you all back into school, we have to remember why education's important, we have to have everybody out and socialising. We've gone with this idea that there are mental health problems, that there are reasons why children might not be in school. We've still stuck with this idea that school is just not really that important in connection with education. And I think as a society, not just in Britain, but in many countries around the world, we're going to be living with these problems for many, many years to come.
Thank you.